Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Gong Show Tarot, the lowest budget show on the internet. I have a very special guest here today. He's got a Master's of Arts and he's got a Master's of Divinity from VST. Is that right?
Yes.
The Vancouver School of Theology.
Yes.
So, I don't know. Okay, we're live now. Let's see if this works this time. I'm here with Kevin Annett. And Kevin, talk to us a little bit about Canada.
Well, we're standing on Canada. It's reclaimed former Dominion of Canada. In 2015, 200 people met in Winnipeg and said it's time to get rid of the monarchy. We tried in 1837 and failed. As a matter of fact, my great-great-great-grandfather took part in that rebellion, proud to say.
Oh, cool.
Philip Annett.
Cool.
And he escaped the hangman, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here.
So you're a rebel, and it sounds like you come from a lineage of rebels.
Oh, yeah.
That's
definitely.
cool.
And, well, the name Annett, French, we had to get out of France. We were Huguenots. The Vatican was trying to burn us to death. But here we are at University BC, which is on soil of Canada. And we've reclaimed the whole nation and said it's time for people to take it back, right? And it's a long process, but we're planting that seed, that idea.
Okay.
You know.
And Canada, you've existed since 2021, is that correct?
2015, there was a
2015. Okay.
convention in Winnipeg, and it really came out of the work we had been doing for 20 years about genocide in Canada, because we realized when the Crown of England and all its church buddies are criminally convicted of genocide, they have no authority anymore.
No, wait a minute, Kevin. I'm an Anglican. I go to the Anglican church. Now, that's my church, the Church of England. Now, I don't know about anything hinky going on. And I don't want to be part of anything hinky going on for those watching.
Well, there may not be at all in your congregation. We're talking about the corp structure.
The larger entity.
We often say to people, it's not about your faith, it's not about your congregation, it's about the corporate entity you're part of.
Okay.
We say the same thing to Catholics. Stop sending money to Rome.
Okay. So stop putting money in the collection plate.
Decorporatize, take back, as I believe Christians were meant to have self-governing congregations.
So we need to take back our houses of worship.
Right.
We need to take back our houses of parliament.
Right.
And we need to take back our land, it sounds like.
Right, entirely. And proper federation and union with Indigenous people. Because get rid of the whole legacy of colonialism, the Indian Act, all of that nonsense.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Musqueam Corporation. Why do they need to be a corporation?
Well, because the term First Nations was introduced by the government in the early 1990s.
Okay.
Because traditionally, European law said if people occupy land for more than 3 generations, it's theirs. They hold a allodial title.
Okay.
But if they give up that and become a corporation, then they can sell land. That's the whole purpose of it. You corporatize, and it's happened everywhere, right?
So it's not really respecting the treaty rights.
Well, a treaty is supposed to be between 2 equal nations.
Right.
Indigenous people are not equal nations. They're not even citizens under the law if they're living on reserve.
Right.
So it's a big kind of song and dance designed to help a native elite become the heads of their new corporation, sell off the oil and gas to China, which is what a lot of the native chiefs are doing, and line their own pocket. Meanwhile, 80% of the people are in poverty, living down on the street. Right.
Right. So it's not helping the average native citizen.
No.
It's helping the sort of an elite echelon up top, sort of like in the carnies, right? Like carney will be fine. The rest of us will suffer.
Well, yeah, and the British Empire did that all over the world. In India, they take the sons of Maharajas, train them at Cambridge and Oxford. They go back and administer the empire for them. That's exactly the way, native politics runs in Canada.
Right. Yeah. So you have these chiefs that aren't on the level, and they're taking the lion's share of the funding, and they live in giant homes, and everyone else is
I've
starving.
Experienced that time and again when I was a minister in Port Alberni. I saw these guys, and they had nothing in common with their own people living in the ghetto, we called it, in Port Alberni, right?
So how can people become citizens of Canada?
You take an oath of allegiance and you basically disavow any allegiance, real or implied, to the monarch of England and the laws of Canada.
So if I say for king and country, you'd say no.
That's right. We don't need monarchs.
We don't need monarchs.
There are no sovereigns except we the people. That's kind of basic to common law.
So if you're a Canadian, then you would have your own sovereignty? Is that sort of the idea?
Not individually, but you'd be part of a new sovereign nation.
Okay.
And that's important because instead of going up against the system as an individual, you have the strength of a local assembly and your courts.
Community.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So what does that, so we're in 2026 now, what does that community look like now? It's from 2015, so we're 11 years later. What does it look like right now?
Well, at the high point, we had almost 50 functioning assemblies across Canada, mostly in the West. where we got the best response.
Cool.
And that came with COVID. People realized there's something seriously wrong
Something's
here.
wrong
We got to
here.
pull
Yeah.
out of the system for the sake of my own health, right?
Yeah.
And we put those seeds in the ground. Some of them continue, others don't. As I
see. So I want to talk about the huge lie that told us. Why are we not calling our government out on the big lie?
Canadians aren't raised to be sovereign, critical people. They're from day one. I remember as a boy in Winnipeg, you're taught that you're a subject of the crown. You're subject to somebody else's authority. But also the whole system in Canada from the top down, like in any feudal system.
Right.
80% of the laws passed in Canada are never even debated in Parliament. They're passed order in council,
right.
Privy Council.
Privy Council.
The old feudal system.
The old system. Yeah. So we're not really in a democracy.
No.
They call it a constitutional monarchy. So we all swear allegiance technically to Charles.
I don't. I've disavowed the allegiance.
Yeah, because you're and now does Canada have a sitting prime minister? Do they have a leadership body?
No, it's not that. Well, yeah, there's a national council that coordinates
council.
the different districts.
Okay.
Like you have a district here on the West Coast. You have
Okay.
one in Winnipeg.
Okay.
A lot of the membership is in BC and Manitoba. Frankly.
Okay, so BC is like a district, or
yeah, and eventually you see the idea is people elect delegates, not representatives, because nobody can represent you, right? You can delegate a job, you're somebody in the local Congress, but then you can remove them if they don't fulfill the will of the people who elected them, right? So you have local assemblies is kind of a counterweight to the national government.
Okay.
Then you have district assemblies and then national Congress.
So if someone wants to come to a district meeting or assembly, how would they go about doing that?
Well, you'd contact the local convener, and we began to hold those regularly.
Okay.
And we pulled back, and we're building up more of kind of a cell structure now, where we find that we tried this at first. You get an assembly of 50 people together, but everyone has different levels of understanding, commitment, their own pet theory about whatever.
Right.
And it was like herding cats. You couldn't. we start small in groups of 3 to 5 people, cells. You educate, you work together, you trust each other. Then a few of them get together and form an assembly.
Cat herding. You see that you heard it here first, folks. So
right.
Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the bell notifications, subscribe to Kevin's channel, and let's get this going. Let's see if this experiment, this Canada can exist. Because frankly, I'm worried about what our government is doing at a national level, at a provincial level, and even at a municipal level. I've had problems with municipal governments because I think they've been infiltrated with these controllers of what I call a technocrat. It's looking more and more like a dictatorship at all levels. Now, Kevin, I want to ask you: do you think people like Carney and Trump? Do you think that they are mere puppets that are being controlled by someone else?
Well, traditionally, that's what politicians were. They're just puppets, whatever moneyed influence is in place. But what you found in the world economy over the last 50 years is such a concentration of wealth that you really have a corporatocracy now that are stronger than governments.
Okay.
And in fact, these super rich guys, oligarchs, are now ruling directly. You've got Putin in Russia, you've got Trump in America, and they're just running it as a private corporation.
Right.
That's the thing to realize. We're past democracy. This is a post-democracy, post if it ever did exist. We're outside the rule of law and everything we knew, and that's the weakness of people. They're thinking in the past.
Now, I'm nervous about this Bill C9 that they're greasing the wheels for right now, which could really put people like you and I at huge risk of being arrested merely for having conversations like this.
Well, that's always the case. I mean, we're all at risk. You can't live in the 21st century and not be at risk. Right?
It seems this way, yeah.
But the point is not to give in to fear and realize they're the ones who are more afraid of us than we are of them, frankly.
I think there was a guy a long time ago named, what was his name? I think they called him Jesus or something. He said, "Do not be afraid." I think he said it multiple times.
That's right.
So don't be afraid, guys. If you have a truth that you want to speak, then start a channel. You can come on my channel, send me a message. I will interview you if you know something about this or something else going on. Kevin knows a lot about missing Indigenous women. Is this still happening today, Kevin? Are people still going missing?
Whole families, not just women. Now this is the cover story they put out to the media.
Whole families?
Yeah, I mean, I've known this for
Wow.
many years working on the streets of Vancouver, getting this from people directly, but a lot of the native people live along what the Chinese liquid natural gas lines. It's directly connected to the highway of tears.
Okay.
And RCMP and Chinese security are just forcing people off the land, grabbing the women, using them as prostitutes in these oil and
Well,
gas camps all
frightening.
over.
So our law enforcement, the people that are supposed to be looking after us, taking care of us, are involved in disappearing people. Am I hearing
Oh,
this
that's an
correctly?
old RCMP practice.
Okay.
It happened way back 100 years ago in the Red Schools. They were doing that, and
Okay.
that's the point. The RCMP is not answerable to us any more than a member of Parliament is, because they all take an oath of allegiance to one guy in London.
Okay.
So there is no accountability in
Yeah.
this system. That's why we got Canada.
So we need to replace these institutions with people that will act justly in terms of protecting citizenry.
Well, we need new structures,
New
grassroots
structures.
based, so that the people,
Okay.
when they're awakened and activated, can control their own destiny.
Now, how do we do this without going through a period of chaos that a failed state goes through? Or is there no way of avoiding this?
I don't think there's a way to avoid it.
There's no way of
especially as
avoiding it.
things collapse, and the people on the bottom get screwed more and more. They got to
Okay.
defend themselves. They need alternatives, and that's what
Yeah.
we do all the time, right?
So for people like me, like I'm very poor, I'm just kind of subsisting on, the bare bones. Is bartering going to become a way of survival?
It's the only way you do. In downtown they said that's how people survive. All
They're
the
just
time, doing that.
trading.
Trading all the time. They
Yeah.
got their own underground economy, and that's
Okay.
the way things work more and more, right?
So there'll be more of that going on. If you can raise a few hens to have eggs, if you can make honey, that's
Mhm.
probably a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you can do that sort of, happened in the 1800s
Yeah.
that is sort of producing food, I think we need to be doing that in Canada and in America, because I think America's in probably more trouble than us in the immediate future.
That's the thing. If you've gone without your whole life, you can survive better. But if you've had expectations and luxuries your whole life, and suddenly you
Mhm.
lose them, that's when people go crazy and panic and start killing each other.
Now, I have friends that are big investors, that they're into real estate and they're into the stock markets, and a couple of them have been sending messages sort of indicating that we might be getting close to a black swan event, like a 1929 all over again. Do you know
Mm.
anything about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you hear about things all the time, but that's how the economy operates. It has to crash periodically to get rid of all the smaller, inefficient units, and so the big guys can grow bigger. That's why you always get monopoly growth after depressions, right?
So if someone had some eggs in the Canadian stock market, what would your advice be to them? What, pull it out, or what do you put
pull
it
that
in?
out and get land.
Buy some land. Okay, if you can get some land, get a hold of some land. Now, you were working on your PhD right here at UBC,
Just over there.
just over here. And what was the PhD in?
Well, I had just been thrown out of the United Church and for exposing the residential school
Okay.
crimes in Port Alberni.
They fired you.
Without cause, they went to my wife and said he's never going to work again.
What?
So we'll help you with your divorce if you want to leave.
And I want to quote the letter they sent you. They said, "We know all about it, Kevin. The only problem is you wrote a letter about it."
Yeah. I had let Native people speak from my pulpit in Port Alberni. This is in the early to mid 90s, and they began to tell these stories. There had been no lawsuits at that point. The church freaked and just tried to bury me quick. I came out here and I began to do my thesis on United Church residential schools on the coast. So they made sure I never completed it. They went to a guy in my educational studies department, Murray Elliott. He was a United Church official who was right at the same time voting on whether to defrock me or not.
Wow.
And he's the academic advisor for all graduate students.
Wow.
So, hey, guess what happened to my funding?
So
Gone.
merely because you wrote a letter outlining the truth of what was actually happening, they destroyed your career?
My wife, it all came at once. The way you deal with a whistleblower is you wipe out their family, their income, and their reputation.
Okay.
Boom, what do they have left? Nothing.
And they did that to you.
It only strengthened me because I knew I was
Yeah.
on the right track, and Native people downtown were trusting me more because they say, hey, this guy got screwed by his own church. Let's work with him.
And they've given you a name. They call you Eagle Strong Voice?
Strong voice. Yeah.
Strong Voice, okay.
That was a bit later, but the thing is, the Native people knew they could. Out of this began the whole movement that eventually forced out the truth. And the so-called apology.
Well, that's why I want to have you on my program, because this is, technically entertainment show, but I do like to have people come on and tell the truth. And I think the truth is very important because a lot of people are out there, they're depressed, they're confused, they believe CNN, they believe CBC, which of course we know is mostly made up.
Oh yeah, well a lot of people know that, but they seem to be going along with it because they don't see an alternative.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to create on the ground.
And that's why people are falling into the depression, because they don't see any way out.
Yeah.
They're caught in this matrix, and like my parents, for example, they tend to trust the authority. They tend to believe the government because that's sort of the environment they grew up in, was that the common good was being served by these people.
Yeah, but I mean, once you lose your house and you get screwed, you realize there's something wrong. It has to affect you personally. Unfortunately, that's the way people are.
Yeah.
And it is affecting more people personally. So.
Well, the price of groceries, people are finding it harder and harder to put food on the table.
Yeah. So anyway, it all comes down to that, and the system's falling apart, and you got to build something beforehand, so then you're not all wiped out when it happens, right?
Okay. Are you on social media? Can people follow you on socials?
I'm blocked on almost
You're blocked.
everything.
Okay.
I have a Telegram site.
Telegram?
Murder by decree.
Murder by decree. Okay.
And I've been blocked on almost anything you can name.
Wild.
Yeah, well, I mean, 90% of the stuff we posted online has all been taken down, but it still had a tremendous impact.
Have you been arrested for this stuff, Kevin?
I've been detained.
Detained,
never charged.
Never charged.
Never booked.
Okay, so that...
Never sued, which is significant, because if I was making it all up, they'd have me in court.
They'd have you put away.
They never attack the evidence.
Yeah.
They always attack me, and that's what you do in a court when the case is against you. You attack the witness, not the evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, do you still go to church?
No.
No? Okay.
No, I consider the world my church.
I'm gonna read a little bit of Isaiah.
Good guy.
But those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles.
Cool.
They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. You seem pretty strong to me. Doesn't look like you're fainting. Doesn't look like you're giving up.
No, never.
Good. Keep going.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for coming on.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thanks you guys for being here. And maybe we'll do this again.
Yeah.
Come on your channel.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cool.
Sure. I do want to get a shot of these two buildings because it's perfect. If you can film it with me, just